What happened this weekend? How's it going? How did that all unfold? You were in and out, and what happened?
Yeah, yeah. Just I don't know. Obviously, the way they put lines for practice is usually kind of what it is for the game. So that's why I was expecting to play today. And then last minute today, I guess there's like just a last minute change. So kind of disappointing, but all good.
Right. How do you deal with that adversity, man? I know it's got to be mentally draining on you, and you and I have talked a long time. I mean, I remember having chats when you were 16 going into the OHL draft and then worrying about where you're going to land in the NHL draft. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure it's a grind. How do you deal with and cope with that? Are you pissed off, frustrated, angry, or motivated? What are you feeling?
Yeah, you know what? I'm still trying to navigate through that because um, I think at the beginning of kind of this year it was difficult, but I just figured any season's a marathon and not a sprint. So if I just kind of stick with it here, then things can change. Um, and then I think my mindset for a really long time was like, let me just like win every day. So whether that's me in the lineup or not, if I had a workout because I wasn't playing, then I was gonna maybe do a little extra. Maybe come to the rink a little early, shoot some pucks, and just at the end of the day, I wanted to, drive home knowing that like I did everything I could that day to like just get better, and really that's all I could control. But obviously, as time goes on here, it's getting a little harder to kind of keep that same mindset. But I think I've done a pretty good job at it, and it's definitely a challenge, but I mean, it's a privilege to be in the NHL. So it's a challenge I'll probably look back on and just, be thankful that I tried my best to handle it the best way I could.
I love that you mentioned what you're talking about essentially is gratitude and being aware of the opportunity that you have every single time that you're there. Um, does that help with your preparation every single time you're on the ice and ready to make an impact, whether it's pracky or a game?
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I think um, one aspect of confidence is just like how one like prepares and trains, right? So if I kind of know in the back of my mind I've done everything I possibly could have in the last couple of weeks or whatever, then I honestly haven't had like I. It's weird. I feel like I have more pre-game anxiety when I'm like playing a lot, as opposed to now because in a way I've just done so much extra work and preparation, and when you're like playing at like once a month, it's like there's not really any crazy high expectations, and all you can really do is go out there and try your hardest, and you're going to make mistakes because of how much time you miss, but it's just like a little easier to deal with. So in a way, that's kind of been an interesting thing that I've picked up on myself.
So, what do you do? How do you combat that inner chatter, that narrative, the nerves, the anxiety? Is it just get me on the ice and I'm going to grip and rip, or are you actually trying to say stuff to yourself that helps you calm down?
I think one thing that I always remind myself of is right before my first game ever in the NHL, my like the skills coach came up to me, and he was just like, "Man, all you really got to do is like focus on like your first shift, and then like once your first shift is done, then think about your next shift." And so that's exactly kind of what I did for that game. It was obviously a pretty intense moment, just playing my first game and whatnot, but just sticking with like one thing in the back of my mind kind of helped me just like play. You know what I mean? So I wasn't focused on my third shift of the game. I wasn't focused on, my second period. I was just focused on like the next shift, and helped me kind of stay a little bit more in the moment, I think.
Yeah. Well, before you just jumped on, we talked about that. You make mistakes, you start to fret the past, and then you conjure up these what if scenarios of the future, right? So that mindfulness and being in the present moment without judgment either, like trying not to label everything. I found when I played pro, it was obviously not at that level, but every single shift, everything I did was a label. Well, that was good, bad, want, need, don't need, those labels affected my emotions and the next shift. So I love that shift by shift mentality where if you make a plan, it works, then you keep playing, and if you make a plan and it doesn't work, well, you've got to keep playing anyway. So um, that's a great point for the kids. What do you see works well for other players? I mean, you're around some really great hockey players. I talk a lot about the comparison trap and not being jealous or envious of what other players have, but more of what kind of nuggets can we take from other players that are doing great things, like is in terms of preparation or mobility or their ability to bounce back or, what is it? I mean, again, you see a ton of great players. What are they doing well at that level, and what could you or any of these kids take from each other? What do you think?
Yeah, you know what? This might be an interesting one, but I feel like the best players, like they don't. I honestly don't care if they screw up. Like they actually don't care. Um, that's kind of the biggest thing that I realized. Like my first couple months, kind of coming into the NHL and stuff like that. Like if a guy has like a really really bad turnover or whatever, like he's like kind of like actually laughing it off after the game. And obviously, some guys get frustrated and stuff with other things like that, but like the thought of like messing up and like the repercussions that come with it like isn't even a thought for them. So that's why I think the best players play just so free and they play like loose and they're having fun and they're making high end plays because they don't really care if they mess up or not,
Right. Do
which
you,
obviously can be a bad thing as well. But that's just what works for some guys.
Now, do you think that's because they have like this self-belief, this self-efficacy where they just know they're good and they know they're going to bounce back or is it a confidence thing or
Yeah, I would say like it's a mix of a couple things, right? Like if you're Anze Kopitar and you've played so many seasons in the NHL, you've done it, you've played, I don't know how many games he has, but like 1,300 games or whatever. Like
yeah,
if you're kind of like that, obviously throughout time, you're just going to build, self belief and confidence and stuff like that. So that's definitely a part of it. Like I don't think that these guys were as like careless when they were younger. So it does kind of come with continued success and just some time too. So you kind of have to earn that aspect in a way as well.
true. Very true. Well, that's great. Does anybody have any questions for Akil? I've got probably a million, but oh, what have I done here? I hit the whiteboard. We don't need that. Take a quick into the gallery. Anybody want to raise their hand and anybody got anything for Akil? You can ask him about, where he played in Toronto here, what adversity he's faced. Anybody have anything for him? Grattan, what do you think, buddy? You got an NHL guy on the phone here. Any thoughts? Anybody? Okay, well, we'll keep thinking, but I've got a couple. Like when you grew up, I mean, when we first started talking, you were really nervous about the noise and the external stuff. At one point, we were worried about NHL draft and numbers. I don't know if you remember or not. They were going up and down, and you were fretting. What advice would you give your younger self? Because some of these kids are going to be drafted into the O soon, and it's coming for them, and hopefully to the NHL. What advice would you give to them about that process, or what would you have done differently if you could do it again?
Yeah, the biggest thing is I think when I was kind of their age, I was um, just thinking like time wise and stuff like that, like how things would work out when really like you guys have so much time. Like I'm 25, I was drafted pretty high, so like, and this is like my first year in the league. Um, I've had a bunch of injuries that set me back and whatnot, but like I'm not like washed up or anything or like an older guy in the league. Like I'm still considered decently young. So I would just say that you guys have a bunch of time. So if you have, one bad year or even two bad years, it really doesn't matter at all um, at that age. So, if you're drafted, undrafted, and even, the other way too, like if you're drafted high and you have a good first year in junior or whatever, like it doesn't really matter. You have to have five. You know what I mean? So I would just say that time, it just, I mean, seasons go by quick to have, as good seasons as possible, but you really have so much time. And I would just kind of stay in the moment and enjoy it because junior goes by quick. And that's pretty much it, I think.
Can you, I mean, aside from today, I'm sure there's some other adversity that you faced. You talked about injuries. Is there a time that you faced that adversity and injury and what you went through, how you felt, how you bounced back? I mean, because there's a kid on the call right now, he's got a broken thumb. He's frustrated. I'm sure we've all been through injuries. How do you deal with that sitting on the sideline thing and knowing that you could make a difference out there, but you're stuck with some sort of nagging injury?
Yeah, I had so my after my first year pro, I had both my shoulders operated on.
Oh,
And so I missed like half of the season the next season. And then I played 2 games and broke my foot my second game back. So I just, it was already a tough year to begin with.
ready to
And
lose your
then,
mind. Holy cow.
yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
then I came back from that and I just wasn't the same. You know what I mean? I hadn't played for a really long time. My foot was still bothering me and I just didn't feel confident. I didn't feel like myself at all. And I think my first like 20 my first 20 games, I had like two assists, like 0 goals. And I'm like, I don't know, I kind of was used to putting up points and stuff like that. Like I had a good first year pro and everything. So I started to kind of lose my mind a bit. I was just wondering if I was ever going to be the same and whatnot. And ultimately, I just kind of stuck with it and just try to go a little harder than I was currently. That's all you could really do in that situation. And then I ended ended that season like really, really well. Like I think my last 10 games, I had like 12 goals or something like that. So completely turned it around. And then all of a sudden, my quote unquote, bad year turned into a really good finish. So kind of turn that upside down. And all you can really do is just kind of stick with it and figure out ways to go, a little bit harder or smarter.
Right. And when you're preparing for games and you're about to play, um, I try to teach the difference between outcomes and process for these kids all the time. We know coaches don't go in the room before game and say, hey, fellas, we gotta score all the goals and let's get on power plays and hey, goalie, get a shutout. Like we don't always just talk about outcomes. What are some of the things that you focus on in terms of the process, the nuts and bolts of the small things? Um, that you want to use or to try to achieve in order to create momentum and build confidence when you're out there? Is it like shooting biscuits or getting inside the dot line, being physical? What is it that works for you?
Do you mean game wise or just
Yeah.
like habit wise?
Yeah, like games and habits. Like what are you working on in the game where, if
Yeah,
you left the game you felt successful, you're like, I played well. What are the ABCs that you executed on the ice in order for that to
yeah.
happen?
Well, okay. So typically, I think when I'm not playing great, I'm just kind of waiting for something to happen for me, as opposed to creating something. So I think just when I move my feet and play physical, like that's when I'm like engaged and I'm creating turnovers, making plays, just feeling like playing like myself. So I think right now I just tried to like start my games off as physical as possible.
Hmm.
And then I like in my own head, I just feel involved. And when I feel involved, then I start to, make plays, play confident, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But practice wise and like habit wise, I think just working on um, kind of, anything scoring wise for me is good. Um, so for example, like I'll do a bunch of, tipping drills and stuff at the end of practice. So going into games, I'm just feeling like I can score and I've been working on it and I'm a shooter, having that mentality is helps me.
Right. Okay, so last question for me is when things go wrong, do you have some sort of a routine or uh, some sort of habits that you might do where you can bounce back? I know we talk a lot about reset routines here with us and the kids, but what do you do if you screw up and you're back to the bench? You slamming your stick and swearing, or what? What are you doing? How do you bounce back?
In a way, I honestly like that's one thing I'm kind of maybe proud of myself about lately is just reacting to those times. Because I think in years prior, like I wouldn't even put myself in a position to like mess up. I would just play too safe and just dump, too many pucks in, and because I was scared of like screwing up.
Yeah,
So I think now I honestly, in a weird way, see it as a sign of growth within myself that like I actually put myself out there and I tried a little something, and I just kind of tell myself like, everyone screws up, like just know that doesn't work anymore, and I get over it pretty good. So I'm not too worried about screwing up anymore, really.
that's great. And when you're around good players that do that, you live vicariously through them. And you talked a lot earlier about players that just literally don't care. They just keep playing, which is sounds like you're doing that a great job of that too. All right, let me see. I think I saw Leo's hand up earlier. Let me just remove the pin and see if Leo is still around. Leo, did you
Um,
have a question?
yeah.
Cool.
What team did you want to play on when you were a kid for the NBA?
Um, I think that would change a lot for me. I was kind of a bandwagoner, so um, forever, like for whoever won the cup that year, I would use that team in NHL, like whatever the year was, like that year. And I remember when the Kings won, and I think 12 and 14, I just like kind of became like a Kings fan in a way. Um, but I'm from Toronto, so obviously, loved Toronto. I'm definitely still kind of am like a Leafs fan in a way. And then I grew up in Florida a little bit, played for the Tampa Junior Lightning, so always idolized them, and also used to go to a bunch of games and stuff. So I would say probably my three favorite teams were the Leafs, Tampa, and LA.
Awesome. And small world, I used to play minor pro against Akil's dad. Yeah, he played for Flint, and I was in Adirondack back in the day. Yeah. How's your dad doing? He's good?
He's good. Yeah, he's good. Like I kind of said before, he's having fun on the dad trip, so it's a pretty cool experience for us both.
Well, yeah, it's funny. Like I've gone from being a player and imagining that being a cool experience to now being a father and seeing your picture with your dad. And I texted him and said, I can't even imagine how you're feeling. So cool. So
Yeah,
that's awesome. Anybody else have
yeah.
any questions for him? I'm sure Keel's busy. He's got to get going here. Yeah. Gee, what do you think, buddy?
How do you find your confidence when you're not playing well or you're in a slump?
Good question.
How do I find it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, this might be a little embarrassing, but it works. I watched like just clips from like junior, honestly. Like my goals from junior or whatever. Just because like it's kind of direct evidence that like I can do it and like it's there and I have the skill and the ability to. And so sometimes just like if I'm in a slump or whatever, it's just like a visual reminder that like it's just a matter of time. It's not my ability. And I mean that's probably what helps me the most.
Answer. We talk a lot about Albert Bandura's theory of self-efficacy. So building that belief in yourself. And one of those things and one of those four pillars is mastery experience. And that's exactly what Akil's talking about is like going back, whether it's big or small, looking at all of the things that you've done in the past to have success. So I challenge the kids to write a top 100 and contribute to it, whether it's at a practice or a game. And just all of a sudden, before you know it, your list gets bigger and bigger. You don't have to do 100 all at once. But when your confidence wanes, you can rely back on what you've actually done. It's valid. It's proof in the pudding that you are on the right trajectory and building those good habits with your confidence and self belief. So I hope that you continue to do well, and we're all proud of you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to the kids today. Thank
Yeah, no problem.
you
No
very,
problem.
very much. What do you kids have to say? Thank you. Thumbs up. Excellent. All right,
Thank
buddy.
you.
There we go.
No problem, guys.
Very
Anytime.
much. All right. Sounds good, man. We'll talk
Thank
to you in a bit.
you.
Cool. Sounds good. Good
All
luck,
right.
guys.
Thanks, buddy. Pretty interesting, right? So I guess in the big scope of things, we understand that it's not necessarily about chasing the best teams, worrying about everything at once. It's not about everything that you're doing right now. It's about a marathon. We talked a lot about winning every day, right? Doing the extras, having gratitude while you're doing it. Not waiting when you're on the ice. Create those opportunities every single time you're out there. Be physical, be a shooter, be mentally sound. Don't beat yourself up too much. Play free, and look for that direct evidence of things that you've done well before. Yeah, I think those are a lot of good pearls of wisdom from a kid that's gone from where you are to possibly where you could be. So I'm glad you were all here and took the time to do that today.